The storm was raging outside when I decided to head home early from my business trip. 8 years of marriage to Jessica, and I still loved surprising her with small gestures. Our anniversary was coming up, and I had a diamond necklace hidden in my pocket. As I pulled into our neighborhood, the power was completely out. I noticed our neighbor David's car parked unusually close to our house. Something felt off. When I approached our front door, I heard voices and laughter inside. I froze. If you're watching this from somewhere with reliable power, take a second to like this video. Trust me, after what I discovered that night, you'll want to hear the whole story of how I turned the tables on the two people who betrayed me. Before that fateful night, my life with Jessica seemed picture perfect. I worked as a senior manager at an insurance company, making good money and enjoying the respect of my colleagues. Jessica was a kindergarten teacher, loved by parents and adored by her students. We had been married for 8 years, and though we had no children, we had built what I thought was a happy life together in our suburban home. Our neighbor David had moved in about 2 years ago. His wife had passed away from cancer shortly before, and he seemed like a decent guy trying to rebuild his life. I often helped him with yard work or home repairs, and he would bring over homemade beer as thanks. I never thought twice about the friendship that developed between him and Jessica. Why would I? I trusted my wife completely. I had been away on a 2-week business trip to the West Coast, finalizing a major client contract. We had talked every night by phone, and Jessica seemed her normal self, asking about my day and telling me about her kindergarten class. Nothing seemed amiss. I was supposed to come home the following day, but when I heard about the major storm hitting our area, I decided to catch an earlier flight to be with her. The storm was worse than I expected. By the time my plane landed, the news reported widespread power outages across the region. I rented a car and drove through the heavy rain, excited to see the look on Jessica's face when I surprised her. Before heading home, I stopped by a jewelry store and picked up the diamond necklace I had ordered for our upcoming 8th anniversary. The blue velvet box sat heavy in my jacket pocket as I navigated the flooded streets. As I turned onto our street, I noticed most houses were completely dark. The storm had knocked out power to our entire neighborhood. I slowed down as I approached our house, and that is when I spotted David's black SUV, parked about 2 houses down from ours. It struck me as odd that he would park so far from his own home, which was just across the street from us. I pulled into a spot several houses away and decided to walk the rest of the way. I am not sure why I felt the need to be quiet about my arrival. Maybe some instinct was already warning me that something was wrong. The rain had eased to a drizzle, and I made my way carefully through the darkness, the only light coming from the occasional flash of lightning. When I reached our house, I noticed a faint glow coming from the living room windows. Candles, I presumed. I had my keys ready, but found the back door unlocked. I stepped inside, silently, water dripping from my coat onto the kitchen floor. That is when I heard them. Jessica's laugh floated through the darkness, a sound I had always loved, but that now sent a chill down my spine. Then came David's voice, lower and more intimate than I had ever heard it. I moved closer to the living room entrance, careful to stay in the shadows. The scene before me was illuminated by several candles placed around the room. Jessica and David sat close together on our couch, wine glasses in hand, her head resting casually on his shoulder. "When does Nick get back tomorrow?" David asked, taking a sip of his wine. "Late afternoon," Jessica replied. "His flight lands at 4, but with this storm, who knows if there will be delays." David chuckled. "Well, I am glad we got this extra time together then." I was about to step forward to confront them about what appeared to be an affair when Jessica's next words stopped me cold. "Have you thought more about what I suggested?" she asked, sitting up and turning to face David. "About next month, the fishing trip." David's voice lowered. "Are you sure about this, Jess? There is no going back once we do it." My blood turned to ice as I listened. Jessica's voice was calm, chillingly so. "I have never been more certain of anything. Once the insurance pays out for his accident, next month you and I can finally be together. For good." I could not believe what I was hearing. My wife of 8 years was calmly discussing my murder with our neighbor. 1.5 million, Jessica continued. "I made sure to upgrade his policy last month. He did not even read what he was signing." They clinked their wine glasses together, and David pulled her in for a kiss. "To us," he said. "And to accidents that look just like accidents." I stood frozen in the darkness, unable to process what I was hearing. My wife and our neighbor were plotting to kill me for insurance money. The diamond necklace in my pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. As they continued discussing details about how David would sabotage the boat during our annual fishing trip, I backed away slowly. I needed to think. I needed air. I needed to not be in that house for another second. I managed to slip out the back door without making a sound. The rain had picked up again, but I hardly noticed as I walked back to my car. My clothes were soaked through by the time I climbed inside, but the cold and wet barely registered. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, rain pounding on the roof as waves of emotion washed over me. Shock gave way to disbelief, then to a searing pain that felt physical in its intensity. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of building a life with someone I thought I knew. All a lie. My thoughts raced back through our relationship, searching for signs I might have missed. Jessica had become more distant in recent months, but I had attributed it to stress at work. There were mysterious phone calls she would take in another room, texts that made her smile but that she would never share. Little things that seemed innocent at the time now took on a sinister meaning. As the initial shock subsided, a cold anger began to take its place. They were planning to kill me, to end my life for money and the freedom to be together. The betrayal was so profound it almost did not seem real. I could have driven straight to the police station, but what evidence did I have? A conversation overheard in the dark. I needed more than that. I needed them to reveal their plans in a way that could not be denied. And deep down, some part of me needed to understand why. Why Jessica would choose this path instead of simply asking for a divorce. I drove to a nearby shopping center that still had power thanks to backup generators. I bought flashlights, batteries, some sandwiches, and bottles of water. Then I waited another hour before heading back to our neighborhood. By then it was past 10 at night, and the storm had intensified again. I pulled into our driveway, this time honking the horn as I arrived, as if announcing myself. I grabbed the grocery bags and made my way to the front door, juggling the flashlights and food as I used my key to open it. "Hello," I called out as if I had just arrived. "Jess, are you okay?" I heard hushed whispers and quick movements from the living room before Jessica appeared in the hallway, a candle in her hand. The surprise on her face appeared genuine, but now I could see the flash of calculation behind her eyes. "Nick, what are you doing home?" She rushed forward to hug me, and I forced myself to return the embrace, fighting the urge to push her away. "Your flight was not supposed to be until tomorrow." "I caught an earlier one when I heard about the storm," I explained, setting down the bags. "I did not want you to be alone during all this." David appeared behind her, and I had to summon every ounce of self-control not to lunge at him. David stopped by to check on me when the power went out, Jessica explained quickly. "He brought over some candles." "That was thoughtful of you," I said, extending my hand to him. His palm was sweaty when he shook it. "Just being neighborly," he replied with a nervous smile. "I should probably head back home now that you are here." "Nonsense," I said, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside me. "I brought plenty of food. Why not stay and join us for a late dinner? It is still pouring out there." The look that passed between them was brief but telling. Jessica recovered first. "That would be nice," she said. "I will get some plates." The next 2 hours were the most surreal of my life. We sat at our dining table, illuminated by candlelight, making small talk as if nothing was wrong. I watched them carefully, noting how they avoided eye contact with each other, how Jessica touched her neck nervously whenever David spoke, how he kept checking his watch as if counting the minutes until he could leave. I asked about their day, about how they had passed the time during the power outage. Their stories matched too perfectly, as if rehearsed. I wondered how often they had practiced their lies. "I am planning a fishing trip next month," I mentioned casually as we finished eating. "The annual one with my college buddies. Should be fun." Jessica's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Oh, you had not mentioned that. Just decided recently. Tom has access to his father's cabin by the lake. Thought it would be a nice getaway." I turned to David. "You fish, right? Maybe you would like to join us." David nearly choked on his water. "I am not much of a fisherman, actually." "Thanks, though." "Shame," I said, holding his gaze until he looked away. "It is going to be quite the trip." When David finally left, Jessica moved around the kitchen, cleaning up, her movements jittery and tense. I wondered if she could sense the change in me, if she knew somehow that I had discovered her betrayal. But she said nothing, and neither did I. Not yet. That night, I lay awake beside her in bed, listening to the storm and to her breathing, which never deepened into the rhythm of sleep. We were both pretending, both waiting. But I had the advantage now. I knew what she was planning, and she had no idea that I knew. The power came back 2 days later, and I immediately put my plan into motion. While Jessica was at work, I installed small cameras in our living room, bedroom, and kitchen, hidden but with clear views of each space. I needed evidence of what they were planning, something concrete I could take to the police. I also began searching through Jessica's things while she was out of the house. In a locked drawer of her desk, I found emails she had printed out, correspondence between her and David going back 6 months. Their affair had been going on longer than I had suspected. There were also documents for a life insurance policy she had taken out on me with her as the sole beneficiary. $1.5 million, just as she had said that night. The emails were careful, never explicitly stating their plans, but reading between the lines, it was clear they had been discussing my accident for some time. One email from David read, "The water is the safest option. No traces looks natural, especially if alcohol is involved." Jessica had replied, "He always drinks too much on those trips anyway." They were counting on the fact that I was a strong swimmer to make my drowning seem even more like a tragic accident. The calculated coldness of it made me physically ill. I contacted a private investigator named John Franklin, recommended by a colleague who had gone through a difficult divorce. I explained my situation, and he agreed to help gather evidence. With his assistance, we set up additional surveillance, including in my car and in the outdoor spaces around our home. The cameras revealed more than I could have imagined. When I was supposedly at work, David would come over almost daily. I watched footage of them together in our bed, in the shower, on the couch where we used to watch movies together. Each video was another dagger, but I forced myself to watch to strengthen my resolve. More importantly, we captured several conversations where they discussed their plans more explicitly. On camera, Jessica mentioned the fishing trip, how she had researched the effects of certain untraceable substances that could incapacitate someone enough to fall overboard. David talked about how he knew someone who could get them what they needed, no questions asked. With sufficient evidence in hand, I consulted with both a divorce attorney and a criminal lawyer. The divorce would be straightforward given the circumstances, but the criminal aspect was more complex. The police would need hard evidence of an actual attempt or concrete plan before they could make arrests. I began moving money into accounts Jessica could not access. Not all of it, as that might raise suspicions, but enough to protect myself financially. I changed the beneficiaries on my actual life insurance policy to my parents and sister. Small steps to untangle our lives before she realized I knew. The detectives I spoke with at the local police station were initially skeptical. People make accusations against spouses during contentious divorces all the time. But when I showed them some of the video and audio evidence, their attitude changed completely. "This is serious, Mr. Foster," the lead detective said. "But we need more. We need them to actually take steps toward carrying out this plan before we can arrest them for conspiracy to commit murder." They suggested I play along to act as if everything was normal while they monitored the situation. It was risky, but I agreed. I told Jessica I had to go out of town again for a week, supposedly for work. In reality, I would be staying at a hotel across town, working with the police to gather more evidence. Before I left, I made sure to mention the upcoming fishing trip again, telling Jessica it was confirmed for the 3rd weekend of the following month. "That is great, honey," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "You deserve some time with your friends." Her eyes never matched her smile. "I have been thinking," I added casually. "Maybe I should increase my life insurance. With the promotion, we have more financial responsibilities now. Want to make sure you are taken care of if anything ever happens to me." A flash of something dark crossed her face before she composed herself. "That is thoughtful of you, if you think it is best." The private investigator followed David to a meeting with a man in a rundown bar on the outskirts of town. Photos showed an exchange of an envelope for a small package. Later testing would reveal it contained a powerful sedative that could cause drowsiness and disorientation, especially dangerous when combined with alcohol. While I was supposedly away, the surveillance devices captured Jessica and David in our home, finalizing their plans. "The stuff works fast," David said, holding up a small vial. 15 minutes max before he is completely out of it. "Just make sure he drinks enough before you put it in." Jessica nodded. "He always has at least 3 beers when he is fishing with the guys. I will tell him to be careful on the water." She laughed, a sound that once made me happy but now turned my stomach. "For all the good that will do." They discussed how Jessica would act devastated, how she would wait the appropriate amount of time before they could be seen together publicly, how they would sell our house and move somewhere warm, maybe Florida or the Caribbean. 1 more month, Jessica said, curled against David on our couch. 4 more weeks and we never have to hide again. The police had what they needed. They planned the arrest carefully, waiting until both Jessica and David were together at our house. I insisted on being there when it happened. I needed them to see me to know that I had outsmarted them. The police moved in on a Friday evening. I watched from an unmarked car as officers surrounded our home. When they broke down the door, I followed behind them, staying back as they secured the scene. Jessica and David were in the kitchen, the vial of sedative on the counter between them, along with printed maps of the lake where my accident was to occur. The shock on their faces, when the police burst in, was nothing compared to when they saw me walk in behind the officers. Jessica went pale, her mouth opening and closing without sound. David tried to run for the back door but was quickly tackled by an officer. Jessica finally managed. "What is happening? What is this about?" I looked at her directly, seeing her clearly for the first time. "I heard everything that night during the power outage, Jessica. Everything." The color drained completely from her face as understanding dawned. The officers read them their rights as they were handcuffed and led out to separate police cars. As Jessica passed me, she whispered, "This is a mistake." I can explain. But there was nothing to explain. The evidence was irrefutable. The vial contained enough sedative to render an adult male unconscious. The maps showed the deepest parts of the lake marked with red X's. And most damning of all, there were the recordings of them planning my death in detail, calculating how to make it look like an accident, discussing how they would spend the insurance money after I was gone. The legal process was exhausting. Jessica and David were charged with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and attempted murder. The prosecutor told me it was one of the most thoroughly documented conspiracy cases he had ever seen. Jessica hired an expensive defense attorney who tried to argue that they had never actually intended to go through with the plan, that it was all fantasy talk between lovers. But the sedative, the maps, the detailed discussions about how to make my death look accidental all spoke to real intent. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I had to sit in the courtroom and listen as their attorney tried to paint Jessica as a victim of David's manipulation, despite the evidence clearly showing she had been the driving force behind the plan. David's lawyer tried the opposite approach, claiming his client had been seduced and led astray by Jessica. Watching them turn on each other was the final confirmation that what I had once thought was love had been nothing but self-interest all along. In the end, facing overwhelming evidence, they both accepted plea deals. Jessica received 15 years with the possibility of parole after 10. David got 12 years. The judge cited the calculated nature of their planning and the violation of trust as reasons for the substantial sentences. The last time I saw Jessica was in the courtroom after sentencing. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I did love you once," she said as the bailiff prepared to lead her away. "No," I replied. "You did not. People who love each other do not plan their murder." She had no response to that. The months after the trial were the hardest. Once the adrenaline of collecting evidence and the stress of the trial faded, I was left with the wreckage of my life. Our friends were shocked, our families devastated. I had to repeatedly tell the story, explain what had happened, endure looks of pity and awkward attempts at comfort. I fell into a depression that felt bottomless. I could not sleep in our house anymore, could not walk through rooms where I had seen them together on the surveillance footage. Every corner held a memory now poisoned. On the advice of my attorney, I started seeing Dr. Sarah Mills, a psychologist specializing in trauma and betrayal. In our first session, I could barely speak. By our 10th, I began to understand that what I was experiencing was a form of grief, not just for my marriage, but for the life I thought I had, for the person I thought Jessica was. "You are grieving an illusion, doctor," Mills explained. "The relationship you thought you had never existed. That is a profound loss, and it is okay to mourn it." The divorce was finalized while Jessica was in prison. All our assets were divided, though the court was unsurprisingly sympathetic to my situation. I sold the house for much less than it was worth just to be free of it. I requested a transfer at work and moved to Colorado, a state I had always wanted to live in, but that Jessica had disliked. I started hiking on weekends, something I had given up early in our marriage because she complained about the time it took. I reconnected with old friends, I had lost touch with people. Jessica had subtly pushed out of our lives. Slowly, I began to recognize how controlled I had been, how isolated from people and activities I enjoyed. Dr. Mills helped me see the patterns of manipulation that had been present from the beginning, but that I had been too in love to notice. 2 weeks after Jessica began her prison sentence, the messages started. First, it was just one voicemail left when I did not answer a call from an unknown number. "Nick, it is me. Please pick up. I need to talk to you." I deleted it without responding. Then came another the next day. "I know you are there. Please just listen to me for 5 minutes. This is all a misunderstanding." The messages increased in frequency and desperation. Sometimes, she would call 3 or 4 times a day. David made me do it. I was afraid of him. "You have to believe me. The police twisted everything. We were just joking around. I still love you. I always loved you. Please talk to me. My attorney says we have grounds for appeal. If you would just tell the court it was all a misunderstanding." I saved the messages for my attorney but never responded to any of them. Her voice, once so familiar and beloved, now sounded alien to me, manipulative and false. I recognized the tactics she was using, the same ones that had worked on me for years. The guilt trips, the gaslighting, the distortion of reality. But I was immune now. Each desperate message only confirmed what I already knew. Jessica had never loved me, not really. She had loved what I could provide, the life we had, and ultimately the payout my death would bring. Eventually, I changed my phone number, severing that final connection. I had a new life to build, one where I called the shots. The process of healing was not linear. Some days I felt strong, optimistic about the future. Other days, the betrayal hit me anew, and I would struggle to get out of bed. But each month was better than the last. Each new experience, untainted by lies, helped wash away the bitterness. 6 months after moving to Colorado, I walked into the local library, looking for a book on wilderness photography, another interest I was rekindling. The librarian who helped me, Katie, had kind eyes and a genuine smile. We talked about books for almost an hour before I realized the time. I did not ask for her number that day, or the next time I visited the library, or the time after that. When I finally did months later, it was without expectations or desperation. I had learned to be complete on my own first. Katie and I took things slowly. I told her about my past early on, not wanting secrets between us. She listened without judgment, and when I finished, she simply took my hand and said, "Thank you for trusting me with that." Trust. Something I had thought might be permanently broken within me. But like a bone that heals stronger at the point of fracture, my capacity for trust was returning, wiser and more discerning. I still keep one voicemail from Jessica, the last one she sent before I changed my number. Not out of any lingering attachment, but as a reminder of how far I have come. In it, her voice breaks as she says, "I do not know who I am without you, Nick. Please give me another chance." The irony is that I never truly knew who I was while with her. It took losing everything to find myself. Sometimes the darkest power outage is not the one that leaves your home in shadows, but the one that temporarily blinds you to the truth about those closest to you. I have learned to find my own light now, and that is a power no one can ever take from me again. What about you? Have you ever discovered something shocking about someone you trusted completely? How did you rebuild your life afterward? Leave a comment below and share your story. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more true stories of betrayal and resilience. Thank you for listening, and remember that even after the darkest storms, clear skies always return eventually.